Have you ever stopped and wondered what kids are actually learning when they're totally absorbed by a screen? Well, it turns out some of the biggest lessons are learned in the most surprising places. And I'm not just talking about when they're playing games, but when they're designing them. So today, we're going to dive right into how that works. It's a pretty powerful question, isn't it? Because let's be real, some of the most important learning we ever do doesn't come from a formal lesson plan. It happens kind of accidentally, when we're just trying to figure things out for ourselves.
And this brings us to this really cool concept that researchers call the hidden curriculum. Just think of it like this invisible school, this secret layer of learning that's baked right into certain activities, especially something as fun and engaging as building a video game from the ground up.
Yeah, this is not about a teacher standing at a whiteboard. Not at all. A hidden curriculum is all about learning by doing. It's about getting our hands on complex ideas, things like systems and logic, just by trying to make something that actually works.
Okay, check out the difference here. In a typical classroom, a teacher tells a kid how gravity works. But when that same kid is designing a game, they discover gravity on their own because their character keeps falling off the screen. They need to figure it out to solve the problem. That is the hidden curriculum in action.
So this all sounds great in theory, but does it actually work in the real world? Well, an amazing study called the Playground Project decided to put it to the test by handing kids the tools to become game creators themselves.
The researchers weren't really interested in the final games the kids made. Their actual goal was to get a peek inside the minds of these young designers. They wanted to see if the process of building a system with rules could actually teach kids how to think in a more logical way.
And get this, the kids in this study were as young as 6 years old. Seriously, we're talking about first graders learning the basic building blocks of formal logic, all because they were given the right kind of digital playground to mess around in. This completely flipped the script for these kids. Suddenly, they weren't just players following somebody else's rules. They were the inventors, the architects. Their big challenge was to take a wild idea from their imagination and translate it into a structured, logical system that a computer could actually understand.
This three-step process is really the heart of it all. See, it starts with just pure imagination. Anything goes. But then it has to get organized. How does the hero move? What happens if it hits a wall? And finally, all of those rules have to be translated into a formal language, into code.
And this right here is a key insight from the research. The scientists weren't just watching the kids play. They were studying how the tools themselves, the specific programming language the kids were using, actually shaped and guided their entire thought process.
And that just reveals such a powerful truth, doesn't it? The tools we use don't just help us get a job done, they can literally change how we think. For these kids, the language of code became a brand new language for their own thoughts.
So the researchers gave the children what's called a kernel language. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a special set of digital Legos. It was a simple collection of commands and structures they could use. So no, they couldn't build anything they could possibly imagine, but they could create a ton of amazing games with the pieces they were given.
Now, two features of this language were super important. Object orientation made them think of characters as their own little things with their own set of skills. And the use of events forced them to think in a really clear cause and effect way. When this happens, then that happens. That is the very foundation of logical thinking right there.
So this tool had this fascinating dual role. On one hand, it gave them a roadmap to bring their ideas to life, but on the other hand, it also put up some guardrails. And this is so important, because learning how to be creative within a set of rules is one of the most valuable skills anybody can learn.
All right, so let's zoom out for a second and look at the really big picture here, because this isn't just about learning to code. This is about the deep, long-lasting impact this kind of creative, structured play has on how a child develops. Researchers have this really beautiful term for this goal, fostering the thought-producing self. Now, it might sound a little academic, but the idea is actually quite simple. By interacting with powerful tools, whether that's spoken language or a programming language, we are actively helping build a child's inner world, their ability to think, to feel, and to create. So in the end, what were they really building here? Sure, they thought they were just making games, but through that whole process, they were actually sharpening their skills in creative problem-solving, structured thinking, and even advanced language. They weren't just building games, they were building themselves.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's really simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. The act of designing a game isn't just play. It's one of the most effective, most engaging, and most hidden classrooms for teaching both logic and creativity. And that just leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. I mean, if 6-year-olds can start learning the basics of formal logic just by building simple games, what else could they create, both inside their own minds and out in the world, if we just gave them the right tools to play with?